This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
You have two stats, goodwill and need for revenue.
Imagine having money.
It's like, oh, these edition wars. What are these old people doing arguing about?
So I just had them like throw their dice at me and I would try to deflect it.
Boxing looks awful. Oh my God.
All 5 rounds, right? Yep. Ooh, that's a lot of getting punched.
Sorry, I dipped back into D&D. I forgot we're a boxing podcast.
A friend of mine beat one with a log once.
Life's not fair.
When I was young, a fireball would destroy your equipment as well as you.
All that and more right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 tabletop RPG, D&D, and boxing podcast in all the realms. That's right, we're branching out into sports coverage here at the Eldritch Lorecast. My name is Ben Byrne. I'm joined, as always, by Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill, and joining us this week, filling in for James Hake, is Adam Carnevale. Adam, welcome to the Eldritch Lorecast.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's my pleasure. I have a question, though, for you, Adam, though, that I have to ask, though. I'm going to say, though, like 7 more times, though. Maybe it's a Melbourne trait. I'm not sure. All right, D&D, getting a rules refresh. Mm-hmm. We got some great suggestions from the community, but I'm curious, what do you think you are going to call the new 5e rule fresh to differentiate it from previous 5e? Rule fresh. See, I didn't even think about it. I'm just snapping it out there.
Well, I was thinking, I've given this some thought ever since they started, ever since the mutterings of 5.5 started happening. And I think companies nowadays love simplifying things. I don't know if you've seen that, like people going through with all the different like web browsers, all of their icons, and they show you as they progressed over time, and every single one of them, they slowly all just become the same thing, which is just the most simplified version of themselves. I think I might just start calling it Dungeons and Dragons and assuming people know what I'm talking about.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, there was
where people
hang the
going.
branding.
Yeah,
there was something in like I feel like the mid 2000s when we had those Apple computers with like the clear colored plastic.
Yes,
and all the icons were like glossy. It was like 3D icons, and now you're right, they're flattened out. Dael Kingsmill, what do you feel is the best new name for the rules fresh?
Best? I don't know. Yeah, you're patenting rules fresh. I don't know about the best name. I just know in my heart of hearts, I've been calling it 5.5. I'm going to keep calling it 5.5 until such time as the D&D community has somehow reached a consensus. I'm going to keep calling it that.
That's fair.
I think there's 3 things to keep in mind. There's what Wizards wants it to be called, what it should be called, and then what we're probably going to call it. I think Wizards wants it to be called Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. I think that would be the perfect thing for them. That's not going to happen. What do I wish it would be called, or what should it be called? Probably 5e. Because then we could push the old 5e and call that 5e old, or 5e legacy or something like that. What will it be called? It will be called 5.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we need to differentiate it when we're discussing it with our players, with friends, with whoever.
Exactly.
If we call it Dungeons and Dragons, especially for people who have been playing since first edition, you need to be able to differentiate it for work, for discussions, for throwing out random insults at people. So for all of those reasons, we need to call it something, and it will be 5.5. But I will call it whatever the people paying me to work on it want me to call it.
You'll call it Shawn's game.
I will, just like Shawn's Lake and Shawn's game. That's right.
Exactly. I love the idea that we would change the name. Like, I love the thought that we could change what we call 5e after 10 years. We'd be calling it 5e, and then we just swap to that sort of. You remember when all movies and video games were putting those little sort of suffixes like legacy or Revelations, D&D Revelations, that sort of thing. That'd be great.
D&D, the fate of the dragon.
D&D, the last stand.
We got some really good suggestions. My favorite in our YouTube comments was D&D, the refifthening. I thought that was pretty fantastic. Delport in the chat has said 5R, and we've got a couple of versions of that on YouTube as well, where it was like revised 5e, D&D revised, 5e reforged in that subtitle kind of style. But I think, Shawn, you touched on it, and I think Logistics Nick, the logistics guy who works at Ghostfire, I think he coined it. We were talking about this, and I was like, oh, that's probably what Wizards are going to do. Because they've already done it with their Xanath, with their Volo's Guide to Monsters and their Mordenkainen's kind of split, is it'll be 5e and 5e Legacy. And that's what all the rules will kind of be named as over there.
If they do that, I'm going to apply the same rule that I apply to that Dracula movie that I never remember the real name of, because I call it Dracula Legacy, Dracula Revelations, Dracula, the Fifth Circle. Like
Dracula Bard the Bowman. Is that the Dracula movie you're referring to?
That is him, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the same guy.
I don't think I had noticed that until this moment. So
Dracula, the Hobbit, the fourth movie.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I remember it. Because I think it's got the villain looks like Orlando Bloom as well, but I could be wrong. All right. Well, speaking of this, we did get an email this week. That's right. I'm jumping around the topics to keep you on your toes, Adam. We got an email this week that's kind of pretty pertinent to this in terms of the 5.5, the new 5e, the re-fifthening rollout, which comes coincidentally from Adam. Not this Adam, different Adam, listener Adam. Hey,
you sure about that?
Oh, maybe you're playing 4D chess here.
I think you mean 5.5D chess.
Beat me to it.
I think I mean 5R chess, actually. This was an interesting question, and like our answer to this is going to be nothing but speculation, but I think we can take some educated guesses because it's fun to, for no other reason. Their question was, how will the new 5e rules be rolled out on D&D Beyond specifically, especially if these are just a rules refresh and it's not a new edition? I think they said during the Creator Summit or the D&D Direct, one or the other, I can't remember which, that there would indeed be three new big ticket books, the PHB, DMG, MM, Monster Manual, however you want to refer to it. But how will that be rolled out? Will people on D&D Beyond be expected to make new purchases? Or will they just get some sort of refresh for being subscribed to D&D Beyond? How will D&D Beyond differentiate between which system you're actually using for your character sheets? How will D&D Beyond? Can you pick and choose which rules you want to use, because it's all compatible, right? So if I have a character sheet that's using the 2014 rulebook and a character in the same campaign that's using the 2024. Which exhaustion rules do we want to use, right? How this all interconnects on D&D Beyond is going to be fascinating.
My best guess on anything like that would be for repurchasing or purchasing at all, they already have different levels of subscription. I feel like it's probably going to be tied into that. I reckon you might find some lower levels of subscription get access to like your Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, and then Dungeon Master's Guide. But for anything else, for any future books beyond, probably going to have to either pay for the books individually or get a higher subscription model. I
reckon we're going to see... I would not be remotely surprised if you have to purchase the new books. It's a new set of books. It's,
Yeah.
So I hope that by the time that it comes around that they will have something in place to reflect physical purchases, because we've been talking about that for a really long time. The fact that you currently have to buy a physical copy of a book, and then if you want it on D&D Beyond, buy it again, but not much less, which is, a lot. So that would be great to see sort of applied there. They've already stated that they're probably not going to be doing that retroactively, which I understand is difficult to implement once people have already bought a book and you don't really have a record of who's bought what. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if you have to purchase the new sets of stuff. In terms of how it's going to be integrated, I suspect for a while we're going to see a lot of divisions on the site where it's like Legacy and 5e or whatever they decide to call it, right? And you have to choose which set you're choosing from. And if you're building a character, the first page will be a choice. Are you building a character with this system or a character with this system? And you'll have to choose. And then it'll be basically the same as it already is. A DM will be able to say which rule sets they're including for characters made for that campaign. I don't think we have to worry so much about stuff like exhaustion was the example you gave, because they already don't include exhaustion really in the mechanics of how D&D Beyond works, right? It's just that you know that you have exhaustion and what it applies to, so you should use the disadvantage mechanic, right? So it'll maybe we will see a thing where you can just like reduce everything by 1 point. That would be really neat, but I'm not holding my breath for it. But and then the DM could just be like, oh, we'll put all these characters made with either system into the same campaign, because they keep saying that you can use both. I have my doubts of how that's gonna go.
Agree there. I can't see that. I can't see two different types of anything working together like that.
But they keep saying it.
Mm-hmm. I get the sense kind of post Creator Summit, post D&D Direct, which is all a bit of a blur to me, to be honest. They kind of swirl together in my head. It was an intense 2 weeks for a moment there. I feel like they might pull back a little bit on some of the changes that they've put through in the Unearthed Arcanas so far. They've talked about how they were kind of test beds. They were, we're trying things out, and we'll see. Do you like this? Do you not like this? The Druid, the change to Wild Shape kind of being a key example of like a fulcrum point in the community, if that's a correct phrasing. I have no idea what that means. I shouldn't have said it. Anyway, so it's possible that compatibility becomes much more apparent with future Unearthed Arcanas, and we're going to find out because they're rushing out. The next one's going to be like 4 or 5 classes, I think, in one Unearthed Arcana. Basically everything else that they haven't shown yet. So I'm curious to see, because I agree with you, Adam. I didn't think that the backwards compatibility was going to be super successful with what they were showing so far, but maybe they're going to pull back. Who knows?
Like, I fully understand. I agree that you would be able to play both a legacy ranger and a new druid in the same party. I'm not sure how that'll go. I suspect they might be relying a little bit on the sort of self-balancing of the community, where everyone will naturally want to play the better version of their own class. But even then, when you're leveling up at regular levels for every single class in the new system, because that seems to be something that they're intent on doing, versus leveling up with different subclass features at totally different levels with the legacy system, it's all just going to get weird. It'll be interesting.
You have 2 stats: goodwill and need for revenue. The lower the need for revenue goes, the more they can do things that will bring goodwill. And vice versa. If it goes this way, then we're going to see, as Adam was talking about, this sort of convoluted, well, if you're currently this subscription, you'll get this, but not this. But if you go up $2, you get this, and we'll do the updates for free. Now, if you buy the books, we'll give you the code so you can get this for free. But if you're a subscriber, you get this other code that also gives you, right? That's how you make money. I know it drives me crazy too, but I've been in this field for a while.
That's business, baby.
It is business. It's how can we sell this and confuse it just enough so you're not sure if this is good for you or not, while still being willing to give the money that you want to give to play the game that you want to play. And that's why they have huge marketing and sales and business departments to figure that stuff out. And I have successfully removed myself from that business and that sort of thinking to make elf games, which makes me very happy.
I hope so much that I assume they'll have to, just as a point of simplicity, they'll have to. But I think I don't know if anyone here has ever used it much, but I use it a lot. The content sharing system that you get with other players in the same D&D game as you. I find that very useful, because then everyone gets to play with the same box, as it were. And I think going forward, especially with all the legacy content, with different things that you might get at different subscription levels, if they do not keep that going, I see the online component of 5.5 or the reforging or whatever, I see that as becoming very, very tedious.
I suspect it'll be like the DM ticks a bunch of boxes.
Yeah.
Because I think that, exhaustion, you're right, Dael, it's not currently integrated into D&D Beyond as being like an automatic mechanic, but I can see them trying to get as much of that into D&D
with
Beyond.
The VTT.
Exactly, yeah. Adam, I'm not great at introducing people, so I didn't mention before that you are the DM for D&D is for Nerds. But this is a great segue because I was going to ask, as someone who DMs for a live play, how do you feel? Not to put you on the spot, is D&D is for Nerds going to transition, you think, to the re-fifthening, or do you think you're going to stick with 5e? Do you think it matters that much with given how similar these rule sets are?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure how we'll end up going. Like, a lot of the reason that we use 5e as much as we do is just the convenience of it. It's very easy to get someone in, to make them a character, and to have all of the characters set up on your screen. Like, I can very easily walk a new player through all of the different little buttons that you get to press on your character sheet and stuff like that. And it's a lot of the things that 5th Ed did over some of the earlier editions are just simplifications. And if this new edition, if it continues the route of simplification, then I think there's room for it. But we've already been branching out and trying different systems. And I feel like 5.5 or whatever is just going to become like another tool in the toolbox where, you know, we'll do a 5.5 game and then maybe we'll do a 5.0 game because some of the systems in that maybe work a little better for the story I'm trying to tell. And then we'll do 3.5. And then who knows, maybe we'll do something crazy like not D&D or something like that.
Whoa, hey.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
We've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, actually. I think we had the question, what would happen if Critical Role had stuck with Pathfinder instead of transitioning to 5e? But linking in with what you've just said about the simplicity and the accessibility of 5e, do you think that that's part of the reason it has been so successful for live plays, which has fed back into the success of the system itself?
I think absolutely, yeah. A lot of, I mean, obviously, you know, you get the old guard who have been with D&D since first generation, but a lot of 5th edition now, at least, is new blood who have come in and they don't even know what they've never played an old edition. And I don't know if they really have any loyalty to an edition. Like, I remember back in the days, back in the old days before even 5th edition was but a twinkle in its father's eye. And I remember players, you know, comparing 4th Ed and 3.5 and saying how much better 3.5 is. And I remember I didn't know anyone who played 4th edition, but now I don't know anyone who doesn't play 5th edition. And a lot of those people, yeah, like I said, I don't think they have that much loyalty to 5th edition. It's just what's currently going.
Oh. Well, loyalty is funny about that because you're not loyal to something until something changes. And then you find out, it's like, oh, these edition wars, what are these old people doing, arguing about? And now 6th edition comes out and people are like, oh, I'm 24, but by God, I remember when we got to, you know, roll dice and exhaustion really meant something, not this minus.
I remember when the moon druid was a tank.
Exactly. So it's a big, what is it? History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. We'll see as editions change, you know, people coming out with their favorites. But you know, in terms of live play shows, I think it's a matter of what do the people on the live play want? Are they looking for the best game for the group? Are they looking to bring in viewers? Are they looking at sponsorships? Are they, you know, all of those decisions will go into what each live play show decides to do. When
it comes to live plays, there is a lot of value to, I say this about sports all the time. We are about sport now. That's what the podcast is.
Great.
This is D&D is an esport now. Speedrunners, yes. But no, this is when I'm watching a sport, I want to be able to pick up the general rules of the sport. I don't need all the details, but the general gist of how the sport goes just by looking at it. And I think it's something similar for live plays of tabletop RPGs, right? You have to be able to generally understand what is happening mechanically. You have to be able to pick up in a few minutes, oh, I see when they want to do something, they have to roll this die, higher number is better, right? That sort of a deal. And so there's a lot of sort of incentive now for Wizards of the Coast to be designing their future editions of D&D with simplicity in mind, because audiences can pick it up. We heard from D&D, from the Creator Summit, that they are looking at, keeping that entertainment value. When they're talking about their virtual tabletop, they're talking about how can we make this streamable in a way that encourages more live plays, because clearly they are valuing that. So there is as well value in holding onto that simplicity. But at the same time, I have things in my head like when Community did their D&D episode, right? And they don't spend a lot of time hovering over the rules, but I think you do get the general idea. Roll this die, the higher number is better. And even in that, like, you can tell it's 2010, I think was that episode, and they're not playing 4th edition. You know that they're playing an old school edition because it's only Abed, who's the DM, rolling the die. No one else rolls the die. So a lot of people watching that get this impression of D&D.
Sorry, go on, Dael. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
I mean, that is a good speaking of which, because I've played several one-shots with Adam where you, for the Black Hill Company, roll all the dice, and it really cuts down on a lot of the searching for the numbers on your character sheet.
Yeah, it's look, hey, the old ways are best. But I see, this is the philosophy we've always had, is that people, I mean, yes, absolutely, I agree. I think that a general understanding of high number good, low number bad is very necessary, I think, to really invest yourself in the game. But I think I think listeners are coming for a story, to be honest. Sure. And I think live plays that focus on story seem to be, or at least have very engaging characters, seem to be the ones, in my opinion, that sound the best. Like, I think a big part of Critical Role, or those similar ones' success, is that a lot of the players are people who are already, shall we say, thespians.
Would be an accurate statement.
I think I agree with you. I'm fascinated that you roll the dice yourself, because I did notice that as well, watching one of your live plays on YouTube, and I was like, how Harmon Quest of you. And I was curious if that was a quest, if that was a consideration for the live play, or whether that was just a habit as part of your DM style.
No, it was originally started as one of my players. So the original cadre of people that we started recording with, one of the players knew D&D, but the other two did not. And they weren't interested to learn all of the numbers. They just wanted to be an elf firing bows and an orc swinging a sword. So I said, well, it'll cut down on a lot of the mathematics and a lot of the editing. So why don't I just do all the rolling for you? And we found that it worked really well for us. So we've never stopped, never looked back.
Shawn, do you roll the dice if you're GMing at your table? I'm just fascinated by this now.
I don't even want to roll the dice as the game master. I want the players I want them to even, roll an attack on yourself. Oh, you rolled a 20. That's too bad. Because it's a little sticking the knife in and twisting it a little bit there. No, I don't care in the long run. I'm looking for the drama or the comedy at the table. So if me rolling the die makes that more dramatic, more funny, we'll go with that. If the player, I'll have one player roll an attack against another player as the monster. Especially if these two are already at each other's throats, to give it a little more juice to their fun little interactions. But It doesn't. I don't have any hard or fast rule.
Behind Shawn's DM screen, not a dice to be seen. Does he even have a DM screen?
I'm too short to use one. So no, I don't.
Truly the most enlightened.
A long piece of paper printed out with pre-generated numbers for him to read out.
I've used those before.
Great. We've sort of backdoored ourselves into a topic I find fascinating, though, because on the weekend 2 weekends ago, I was at a convention running Agents of the Empire, which has automatons in it, which have a habit of exploding when they get reduced to 0 hit points. And you roll a d6, and on a 1, they explode, and dex saves are made, and damage may be dealt.
I'm running a campaign with automatons in it right now, and suddenly I have an idea.
I'm in a game with automatons, and I'm scared.
You should be. Automatons are dangerous. But I was rolling that D6 every time one hit 0 hit points behind the screen myself, without necessarily telling the players what I was doing or why, unless one of them actually exploded. And then because I had a DM, Meek, who I was running opposite, she would run we'd take in turns in running a session so we didn't burn ourselves out over 9 hours. She had the players roll when they reduced a creature to 0 hit points, or an automaton specifically. And I thought that's clever at the time in my head, because that puts the fun in their hands and lets them see the result happen in real time. And so then I started, in my final games for that weekend, I started asking the players to roll that dice instead. And they rolled not a single one. It was terrible. But if you roll on the inside of the screen and they don't know, then it does create like a tension of like, wait, what's about to happen? And so I just think it's a fascinating topic of like, should the players roll? Should the GM roll? Can you roll behind the screen? Can you roll in? Should you roll in front of the screen? And the question of should is kind of an inherently false question, because there is no should, but it's just like the dramatic questions and the question of where the fun is that comes up then is fascinating, whether it's stealth checks, whether it's all rolls, whether it's not, it's interesting.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I think anytime I make a decision of whether I'm rolling something or the player is rolling something, I'm always trying to think, what is the more engaging and interesting decision here? Not necessarily what does the rule book say.
Sure.
Out of habit, I tend to roll most stuff behind the screen. The other day, I rolled in front of the players in a dramatic moment for the first time. And I think similar to you getting the players to roll the explosions and not a single one happening, it was a little bit like that. I rolled like a really medium number, right? Like if I rolled in front of them and it was a 20 or a 1, great. But roll in front of them and get like an 8 that adds up to 12 or 13. It's like, was it worth it? But no, I do have a habit of rolling behind the screen. I have run campaigns where for stealth as a sort of house rule element, I presented the option that stealth would be rolled in secret behind the DM screen, and the players were into that. But it did also lead to awkward things where I didn't want to walk around the table to them. They didn't want to walk around the table to me. So I wanted them to roll the die because it would feel fake if I did it. So I just had them like throw their dice at me and I would try to deflect it behind the screen, which was maybe an added element I didn't need to include, but
it's a new mini game, you know, stealth checks are like, how accurately can you hit Dael's hand? Yeah.
People throwing dice at us, yeah.
I have to disagree with Horrible Cabbage's suggestion in the chat, because I've heard of this before. They said, you can find a middle ground, ask the players to roll, but don't tell them what they're rolling for. The reason I personally don't love that idea is because I think if you're a player and you're just rolling a dice with no knowledge of why, it doesn't feel like anything's happening. It just feels like you're being told to roll a dice. You're not making a choice. You're not hoping for a result except that number be high. Whereas if the DM rolls behind the screen, even as a player, if you don't know what that roll is for, you know the DM does. And so that feels like something is happening, even though the result of what it is, it isn't revealed to you yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah. One thing you can do is say for a random encounter, you can say, Charlie, could you please roll a D20? You want high. And that way they don't know exactly what it's for, but they know the expectation is, I hope it's not low.
Yeah, sure. Roll a D12. You better hope it's not a 3 or lower, right?
Right, okay, that's fair. That's fair.
I do sometimes, I find this very fun. I sometimes get the players to roll the random encounter check. And every time I do that, I say to them, pray you don't get, it's on a D12, pray you don't get an 11 or a 12. And I find that always gets a really great illicit response from them where they're like,
suddenly you don't want to roll.
I'm going to try that. I've got my players going through an area of wilderness right now, so I'm going to give that a shot. Although one of my players listens to this podcast, so he's going to know what's happening. All right, speaking of not knowing what was going to happen, at Creator Clash 2 recently, we didn't know what was going to happen when Marisha Ray entered the ring with Hayley Sharp for a throwdown, no bars held, fight to the duel for glory.
It is boxing, so some bars were held.
I don't know what any of those things mean.
No, some holds were barred. There we go. I got it around the other.
Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha. Did anybody get a chance to catch much of Creator Clash 2 or specifically Marisha's fight?
I did watch specifically Marisha and Haley's fight, and I have to say, boxing looks awful. Oh my God. As a combat sport, you don't think about that. And then you're watching it.
And then it's there. Ooh.
Oh my God. Near the end, there was this one part where Haley, Marisha's got kind of Haley just at arm's length, trying to keep her away. And because she's got, I guess, just slightly longer reach, she punches out 3 times, and you watch as Marisha's head just boom, boom, boom into the punch. Oh my God.
You've got a brain in there.
Like she was a speed bag. It looked awful.
Ooh. Wingspan matters. Yeah, I didn't end up watching because I couldn't figure it out, but I would have watched because, it's got some old faves from YouTube that I used to watch back in the day.
Right.
Like Alex Wasabi or Will Haynes from SourceFed. I was like, why are you here? That's crazy. But I didn't end up watching because I couldn't figure it out. But it was really hard watching everyone on Twitter getting excited for it. And be like, yeah, this is going to be great, because I did tune in for the chess boxing tournament that was not too long ago with a bunch of YouTube creators.
Yes.
And the Creator Clash last time, which had some people, and it's just, it is brutal. You see all these people who are really excited for their fight, and then they come out the other end like, I don't want to box again. Never again.
Chess boxing is very funny. Going from the very quiet, subdued sort of mental arithmetic of boxing into the yelly spectacle that is a game of chess.
Yeah.
Props to Marisha, though she lost the fight. Stuck in there. I think it was 5 rounds.
Right?
Yeah, she went.
That's a lot of getting punched.
I can't even stand for 5 rounds, much less put heavy bags on the end of my hands and get hit in the face.
Okay, it's a funny joke, but it's also a lie, because we know that you won the step counter challenge.
That's true.
Because you're in a treadmill all
If
day.
all I had to do was walk around the ring, I would be fine.
Yeah.
Or run in the case of someone chasing me, trying to hit me.
I think you can probably stand longer than most people at Ghostfire, as proven.
That's rope-a-dope. You got him on rope-a-dope.
That's right.
Maybe you're pretty good at it, actually.
I haven't boxed in a ring, but my brothers and I had boxing gloves as kids, and we did pound each other in the head repeatedly a few times.
You're prepped. Next Creator
I'm perfectly
Clash,
fine.
Shawn
So
Moen.
that's no.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, outside of all the actually getting hit in the face and the ribs and the other places, I did a very small amount of boxing just as part of like a general gym routine, where my trainer was like one day, all right, let's do some boxing. I was like, all right, I'd love to punch some stuff. Yeah, let's go. I want to go to war. Let's do this. And within like 5 minutes, I'm exhausted just from, like, I wasn't getting hit. He just had the like pads on, and I'm just exhausted from just the like bopping on my toes and like throwing punches. And then I'd slow down and stop bopping, and he'd be like, you're going to get hit. What are you doing? You need to keep bopping. I'm like, okay, I bop away I will. But yeah, congratulations to Marisha. The Creator Clash raised, I think, collectively across the whole event, $1.3 million for charity, which beat their record from last time, which was just under 1 mil, and they're planning to do another event next year. Dael Kingsmill, Adam Carnevale, Shawn Merwin, can I expect any of you jumping in the ring?
I'm in.
Bop, bop.
Let's
You're
do
in.
it.
No.
I hurt my hand doing that, by the way. But you know what? That wouldn't happen to me if I had a boxing glove. So I'm in.
Yes. Maybe you should
that
always
true?
be wearing them.
I could see that Haley, I don't know if Marisha did, but I saw that Haley had her gloves taped on. Is that normal? Is that?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
apparently.
Because you'd get sweaty. They could slide off. Whoosh. That'd be a great move, though. Don't tape them on. Wha! Throw the glove.
Ranged attack. To be
Blind
fair,
them. Bah!
that is kind of how a couple of, like, is the Manticore has spikes on its tails and it just thrashes its tail so hard, one of those spikes
Which
comes
boxer
loose.
is this?
Sorry, I dipped back into D&D. I forgot we're a boxing podcast.
It shoots its spines.
My bad.
Is there like a real world creature that does that to explain how that became a thing?
I mean, maybe.
Like
There's
just sea anemones or something? fire their spines.
Do you have porcupines in Australia?
No, we have echidnas.
Yeah.
They're like porcupines, but cuter.
They're adorable. We took
yes.
Joey.
Real life porcupines, as if the ones you have are
Fake
mythical.
porcupines.
Wait a minute.
A
What?
friend of mine beat one with a log once.
That's a confession.
We'll leave it at that. It wasn't me, but the quills were stuck into this piece of wood. So that's pretty.
Are you admitting to a crime right now?
I did not. I was not there.
You were not involved.
I was not involved in any way because
we
it
do
was
not
trying
condone
to
the beating of small
it was
animals.
trying to attack him, so it was really a matter of self-defense. And he
The
had
thing
no
you had to
boxing
pay
gloves.
attention to is that the spines were detachable.
They were detachable.
Right.
They were stuck about this far into a piece of wood. So yes, yeah.
Ooh.
Echidnas are like porcupines, but they've got Australian accents. So
Yes.
they're just like,
yes.
And they're
Yeah.
upside down,
Play-
so the spines don't do much.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Do they play past the
Yeah.
parcel? I just
course,
sometimes,
yeah.
yeah. You know
They
what's
are the
weird?
parcel.
They
I
are the
took
parcel.
James when James was in Australia last year. I took him to go see some Australian animals, and we saw some kangaroos just sitting on the ground and some koalas just sitting in a tree. That's all they really do is they just sit around. But the echidnas, they were active. They were moving around.
Oh, yeah.
What struck me as strange
That's
is their
what you wanna
back
see.
feet look completely dislocated. Their back
Yeah,
feet are
'cause-
like around the opposite way.
Yeah, they don't match because it's for digging. It's a digging thing. It's like how their pouch goes backwards, so that I also just would like to take this moment to point out that Echidna is the name of the mother of all monsters in Greek mythology. That's where the name Echidna comes from. And I just
Wow.
love that they gave it to Australia's possibly cutest animal.
I love echidnas do this very cute thing. I don't know if you ever noticed it, but if you approach it, an echidna, as an obvious defense mechanism, will put itself as deep in the dirt as it can with just its spines facing out. But because of that, it can't see you. So if you stay really still after the echidna does that, after a little bit, it comes up. It's like, all right, I guess they've gone. And then you can watch it waddle away. It's so cute.
Oh, I wish I'd seen that. Next time I'm at Hillsville, yeah. But we digress. Just quickly wanted to mention, if folks want to see it, Marisha has on the Critical Role YouTube channel a video that kind of goes through her journey from going from, her Rocky Balboa, going from zero to hero, from not boxing to boxing, which is pretty cool. If you want to go watch that. And I had something else I was going to mention. Oh, did anybody listen to Sam's song? Her entrance song. It's on Spotify. Neither could I, but it's on Spotify. Yeah, if you search Sam Riegel as the artist, and he's listed there twice, but if you find the one that's like the Critical Role symbol, like on the tan background, you'll find the song. It's hilarious. There's a lot of smack talk in it, targeted at Haley, which is hilarious and great, and it's worth a listen, and it's a bop. That is all I wanted to say. All right, let us jump into some emails if you want to send an email. Finally, we got there. We've done it. There's not as much news this week. Matt, also known as Synthetic20, sent in an email. If you want to send in an email like Matt did, email podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. I feel like I forget to mention that. Podcast@ghostfiregaming.com is where to send them. And Matt has asked, what tabletop RPG has been foundational to your knowledge of game design? A game that has affected you so deeply, you cannot uncouple its design principles from your own work.
My hand to God, I swear this is true, but there is a role-playing game called Toon, which is the Looney Tunes role-playing system. And it has a rule that says if you're ever unsure of something, if you don't know what the rule is, if you don't know if something should work or not, flip a coin. And if the player calls it right, it works. If they call it wrong, it doesn't. And I use that all the time.
That's it. That's game design right there, baby. Oh man, this is a tough question. I'm trying to think because I feel like lots of games have influenced me a bit. Does that make sense? Rather than one really, really opening my eyes. Like the Iron Kingdoms RPG was a bit of an eye-opener because it's got sort of a 2-class system. That's just during character creation, you pick 2 different classes and level up with both of those at the same time. And I just was like mind blown when I first saw that. I suppose legacy board games. I mean, Alice is Missing does it as well, but it was kind of already percolating in my brain. This idea of, being guided through a story by a deck of cards that has sort of, hey, there it is, that has sort of changing elements that you can swap in and out, which actually, if I trace it back to its very origin in my life, when I was learning magic tricks, when I was in the 3rd grade, there was a magic trick that involved a deck of cards and certain orders at certain points. But that idea of, being able to semi-randomize something like that and the idea that it uses a system other than dice. Those are two that immediately come to mind.
I have to go back. Well, D&D obviously was what I first played when I was pre-teen, and that was really the only game that was out there that was available to anyone who wasn't literally living like in Wisconsin at the time. So the game Top Secret taught me that there was something that you could play other than fantasy. You could actually play a secret agent. I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that there are other games. Paranoia, speaking of tune, Paranoia is a game that taught me that games could be designed to be funny, yet still be fun and dramatic and have all of the things that other role-playing games do. But when it comes to like the mechanics, games like Fate and Dungeon World or Powered by the Apocalypse World taught me that it's just not pass fail, that you can have these these gradients of success and ways to turn those things into really cool stories. And it's when I started getting into those games that I realized, oh, we should start thinking more about the end product than just about the rules, because the end product is the point of the game. And if you start with an end product and you design your way backward, then you can actually create a game that creates a cool end product, whether it's a story or a mechanic or fun or whatever it is that you're looking to show to your table.
I haven't played a lot of other systems. It's a real bugbear. It's a real kind of blind spot for me, is that I've played enough to kind of have an idea of what a few systems do, but not enough to be able to speak intelligently about them. But I suppose when it comes to designing within the 5e space and kind of meaning that broader than just 5e specifically, but this kind of fracturing of 5e that we're seeing going outwards between all the different, I have the word clones in my head, but it's not really what I mean. All the different kind of
because of paranoia
deviations, that are happening. But it was going, like, if you look at the monster manual specifically, there's something about the design of those monsters that is relatively closed off. Some of them do different things, but there's generally a pattern of what things do in the monster manual. Dragons all have a pattern of specific abilities that they can all do. Giants and elementals kind of similarly all have a pattern of things that they tend to do. And it got me really disappointed for some monsters early on where I was like, this, whatever it is, Manticore even, like a Manticore I think is like CR3 maybe or CR4. Yeah. Relatively low. And I was like, this thing should be way more dangerous than what it is. And the encounter should feel way more, I don't even know what it was, but I think I found in Kobold Press's monster manual books, it was reading those initially where I was like, oh, you don't have to stick with these patterns at all. Like you can really push beyond and get really creative with how, and you can virtually completely rewrite how some of these abilities work so that the monster feels unique and not just the numbers reorganized in a different way, if that makes sense. I think Kobold Press are really good at like creating simple abilities that are unique to that stat block that make that monster feel different from any other monster.
I think for the most part as well, a lot of earlier Dungeons and Dragons editions have very inspired my current Dungeons and Dragons creations and stuff. I really enjoy, and I know this isn't for everyone, but I really enjoy lethality in games. Sure. I think
you're here with Ben. He's
yeah, let's kill some PCs.
I absolutely, the idea that any fight could potentially be your character's last is exciting.
Have you
for
seen
me.
boxing? Like,
Yeah, I
fighting's
know, yeah.
dangerous. You don't want to. You don't want to get hit.
And that's when some of the holds are barred.
But in addition to that, a lot of what something like my first edition was 3.5, and what I think 3.5 did very well is that there were a lot of the 3.5, in my opinion, considers your entire character sheet fair game. And I love that from a design point. I like the idea that any part of your character sheet can be altered for the worse.
Mm-hmm. That's a really great point. And that's very hard to design for, but when it works really, really well.
Yes.
When that +4 defender, holy whatever sword, it's like it just crumbles in your hand when you are hit by the rust monster.
Yep.
It's not, it takes a -1 and then it takes a -2. No, it's gone. That sword that you've spent years, lavishing your power into.
Fair.
Yeah. Gone. Yeah.
But I think that's kind of along the lines of what I was talking about as well. I was talking with monsters, but also realizing that in the design of 5e, a +1 sword is magical and it's a problem solver, is what a +1 sword is. It's like, yep, now I can fight ghosts and I can fight demons and I get that +1 and you can't take it away from me because as rules are written in 5e at least, rust monsters I don't think affect magical weapons. They only affect non-magical things. So there's this like sanctity on like once something's magical, it's like, you can't mess with that anymore. But I love just going like, yeah, Ken, why not? It's, magic doesn't mean
all-powerful DM.
Yeah, exactly.
You talk to a 3.5 player about the spell Mordenkainen's Disjunction, and I guarantee you'll see tears.
Well, the tears are
the Helm of Disjunction was a reference to in the movie.
Yes,
I think.
it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
The problem with a lot of these is the time it takes in order to fully go through the steps. So, every magic item you have, let's roll. We have to roll for it. You have what? 27 magic items. All right. 27 rolls. Here we go. Okay. That's okay. Nope. That's gone. Oh, that's okay. And so that's the weeping that you see from many people is, okay, we're going to be here a half an hour figuring out how many magic items we still have left after this is over.
Yeah,
Did you see, Shawn, there was in EXU Calamity by Critical Role. So spoilers for people who haven't watched Calamity, but go watch Calamity. It's short. You can do it.
Wait, I've got headphones on. That's not working.
But in one of the final episodes, like a level 18 or something campaign. It was really, really high level. And so everyone's loaded with these magic items. Everyone kept asking, can I have this? Can I have this as well? What about this? And then in the sort of final or penultimate session, Brennan had this thing happen where basically everyone's magic items started exploding and you had to roll for every single magic item that you had on you to see whether it would explode, and you took damage based on that. It was just over and over and over again. It was really sadistically fun to watch. It was very entertaining.
When I was young, a fireball would destroy your equipment as well as you. Yeah.
I'm just imagining that scene from Thor Love and Thunder where Zeus like flicks his robes off, but it's like a fireball just goes off and it's like, oh no. yeah, exactly.
So good. I also should mention that part of why I haven't had that like, bam, my eyes have been opened by a tabletop RPG is that I, both to my benefit and detriment, take a lot of my inspiration with game design from video games or TV or just generally genre studies, right? Like I sort of am taking constantly just the weirdest lessons from the weirdest places. Like one that I go to a lot of the time as a great lesson is I love the XCOM games. And there's an interview with one of the designers who says that humans are really bad at judging sort of chance and probability.
Yes, I know this talk.
Yes, and so XCOM deliberately says that you have less chance to hit than you actually do, because then it feels right. And I always implement that when I'm designing my monsters or whatever. I'm like, I want the heroes to feel like they're hitting this monster about half the time, so I have to make it so that they're hitting it 65% of the time.
Yes.
That's not my experience of playing XCOM, where I've definitely had moments where I'm like, I need this shot to go through, or this entire
98% chance
98%.
to hit.
Yeah, I'm gonna do this. This is a sealed
deal. But there was a 2%
deal.
chance of missing.
mind you, there is, and it's kind of weird how we, I don't think anthropomorphize is the right word, but kind of give life to non-living things, because XCOM is that game where you name all your characters after people you know. So I accredit this to my wife, even though it wasn't actually her doing anything. But she was crouched behind a car. She had a 5% chance of hitting and just absolutely T-boned a dude with a revolver from across the map. And I was just, I couldn't have been prouder.
Was this in game or real life?
Am I admitting to a crime suddenly? All right, with the time that we have left, let us dive into Naomi's question, who also sent an email to podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. Which is the email address. Naomi asks, what is your approach to making puzzles for your D&D game? Naomi's done riddles. They've done physics puzzles, like put stone on heavy object to make door rise. They've done exploration puzzles where you've got to go and find a key in a different room, Legends of Zelda style. They've done trap puzzles, which is like if you step on the wrong thing, then darts fly out at you. All to kind of, greater and lesser success, but just wanted to know what our general approach to puzzles happened to be.
I always try to, first things first, for any puzzle I'm designing, I want to gauge the tone of the game, because a very eccentric puzzle can be quite fun, but you don't want it in the middle of your, you don't want a very eccentric, you don't want people mixing up jugs of water while the druid is bemoaning that their parents have passed away or whatever. You want to make sure you're matching. And then as well, like a sillier game, a more serious game, you can't get away with as many out there puzzles. They kind of need to make sense to be in the world. But I always think of puzzles as having three elements. And that is pressure, which is a loss of something, which is either, it can be time, it can be resources, whatever, but failing to solve the puzzle immediately should come with something. And then the next one is something physical, which I like as you can give them like a map if you want. You can give, it's just putting something in the player's hands is really goes so far. And like I said, it can just be a map that can just be just something to look at essentially. And then consequences for failure. So you can fail the puzzle, but it's going to cost you basically.
And I mean, I feel like it goes without saying, but consequences for failure ideally shouldn't be you are locked out of the rest of the adventure.
Yes.
That could be a hard one, because it's so natural to put a puzzle where a lock would be. You know what I mean? And I do it. I'm about to do it in my game tomorrow. But you kind of have to be prepped for there to, there needs to be another access point into the story rather than just leaving people sort of thinking. I think it's really interesting, this idea of give them something physical. Because a lot of my favorite puzzles that I've done in the past have been, I don't like making them like straight up riddles or difficult problems, because you can never... You will be astounded by how much your group of human beings cannot solve.
Yes.
But, I like to do things like create a puzzle that is just, you have a journal entry that describes someone coming from the location you're trying to find to, a specific point, like a town or whatever. And you have to backtrack and, compare it to a map and go backwards and sort of pinpoint where the location is. Something like that, where it's like the answer is there. You just kind of have to think about it backwards. Those sorts of puzzles, I think, tend to be good because people can figure them out.
Yeah.
But there is this question of, are you challenging the characters or the players? And what do you do when there's a dissonance between character intelligence and player intelligence? And I have no idea.
I just want to I have a question to add to this, because this is a massive question that kind of bugbears me a little bit, right? Is this, and I get the dissonance that people have, because it's the same argument about, we expect a bard player to be able to convince the DM of their argument to convince an NPC of something, but we don't expect the barbarian to actually be able to get into a boxing ring and box with Marisha Ray.
Sure.
And so why do we expect our intelligent characters to be able to, solve a puzzle by themselves? Because it's challenging the player and not the character. But for me personally, finding this balance, and this is where the question comes in, is like, if they just have to roll a dice to do an intelligence check to solve the puzzle, or even 3 intelligence checks in a row, or like an investigation and then a nature check, succeeding or failing those checks is not doing a puzzle. That's just rolling dice to see if you roll high enough.
Right. And there's this tricky thing of like in combat, right? So no one's expecting you to be able to do combat, but the barbarian in battle is rolling multiple checks for starters, which, brings things closer to the average, but it also has other layers into it that makes it more complicated. How much
like
damage did you do? Did you crit? Did you use, X ability at the same time, which you don't have if you're just making straight intelligence rolls.
And the other thing is, like, in a video game, the puzzle in a video game doesn't, like, Kratos isn't presented as being some savant of solving puzzles, and yet God of War is filled with puzzles that Atreus will solve for you the second you step into the room.
There is no challenge players versus challenge the characters, because the players are the characters and the characters are the players. And it's a distinction without a difference in the long run, because in combat, you don't say your wizard would know exactly where to put the spell, but you don't. Right. You just put the spell where you want to put the spell, and you don't roll to see if your wizard knows the best place to put the spell. You just let the player put the spell where the spell should go according to the player. So to try to split that difference ends up leading down the road to madness.
Sure.
What you need to do is, first of all, ask yourself, do I want a puzzle here, and why? Is the puzzle because you think there's something clever that you want to do, or is it something that your players are actually going to enjoy? Because if it's a majority, it's a very slim majority of players actually like puzzles. I've been at conventions running a huge event where every table's playing the same adventure and it's competitive, where people have gotten up and left because there was a puzzle in the adventure. And I'm talking about paying like $50 for an 8-hour event. And halfway through the first hour, these players got up and left because there was a puzzle.
Imagine having money.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just thinking that. He said $50 for 8 hours. And I was like, what's that an hour?
Exactly. So don't put the puzzles in unless the players want the puzzle. Make them easier than you think they need to be. Because chances are, even if you think it's terribly easy, it's not going to be. Adam and Dael have said all the other smart things to say. I will just add, treat it like you would treat any encounter that you create. Think it through. What's the reason for it to be there? What do the players need to know going in? What are they supposed to learn coming out of it? Is there something that they learn in between? Have you thought about ways to help them out if there is a problem with the encounter? Those things that you would do for an encounter, also do it for a puzzle.
One of my biggest tips that I could give about making a puzzle or a trap or anything like that is to make it multi-stage, because then if it's multi-stage, every stage can be so simple, and you can mix, I think, if you give them like a really, really, really simple puzzle, and then the next step requires like a roll, then you can kind of, in my opinion, at least mix. And then you can get the challenge the player versus challenge the character. It's worked for me, but obviously that's just been literally my experience. And I will also say, one of my favorite things to do is to make the players think they're in trouble when they're not actually in trouble. I have, behind me on the wall, I've got an hourglass that doesn't work. Don't tell my players.
I don't know if you know this. We're streaming.
Oh, no. But you flip it over and sand starts going through. But about halfway through, the sand stops. And if you're not paying attention, you won't notice. And I have used that so many times. My players have thought they had
one.
Yeah, that's genius. I love that.
Very good.
Because I've never put a timer on the players because I've always felt like just the time to talk between is going to eat up too much of that time. But I love the idea of a false timer kind of getting them to slightly flip out. Yeah, but the trick, I think, and you see this in video games a lot, and Viva La Dirt League did like a parody of this in one of their skits, which was really funny, is making a puzzle look really hard, but it is actually really easy. You know, in the Viva La Dirt League skit, they have, the old man appears and he says, to open the tomb that has not been opened in 300 years, you must find these 3 runes. And the guy's like, is that one? And it's like, yeah, okay, good. Yes, you've done well so far. Is that one? and just finds them super easy. Then he's got to put them in order, does that super easy. It's a great skit, go look at it. But it's hilarious because it's what video game puzzles tend to be like is, look, this has a story around it that this hasn't been open in 300 years, and that makes it feel like it's going to be this really difficult thing. But actually, it's a fairly straightforward logic puzzle that anybody could solve, applying kind of half a moment's thinking to it. But it still feels like it's engaging your brain. The trick is doing that, or the skill is doing that and making it still feel like the story fits the puzzle, and it doesn't feel like it's like, wait, this kid's puzzle does not fit the story of this epic, ancient crypt that hasn't been opened in 300 years. Obviously, everybody else who came wasn't trying that hard. But I'd also like to comment on, and you talked about this, Adam, with multi-stage puzzles, is kind of like opening our understanding of what like a puzzle is within a scenario. Because I think very often when people think of puzzles, they think of a room with a series of circumstances that need to be solved to get to the next room, and everything you need is right there and then to be able to solve it. I like to think of puzzles as, part of the exploration tier of play.
Yes.
And that they are an opportunity to invite the players to, hey, you don't have everything you need in this room, but if you explore parts of the dungeon you haven't explored yet, you might find the missing piece that needs to be slotted in here to make the door open. Or, this room hasn't been opened in a really long time, but if you read the journal that you found, you might find that, 3 rooms back, or that you were given when you were sent into the dungeon, you might have the clues you need to be able to open this door. It's the old Skyrim claw, like dragon
Literally
claw,
what I was thinking.
Yes.
And so you need to, I think that the trick there is making it very clear to the players if they don't have all the ingredients, like letting them know they don't have all the ingredients so they're not hitting their head against a wall going like, why isn't this opening? Why isn't this solved? But it's an opportunity to kind of pull them through more parts of the adventure.
Right. Yeah. I also want to say I've been on record before. I've made videos. I stand by it. My ideal self, my vegan evocative narrative self, firmly believes that most of the time puzzles don't make sense. There are only a couple of places where you can make the existence of a puzzle or a puzzle trap really make any sense. Because a lot of the time it's like, why would they design this so that some rando can come and solve it? You know what I mean?
Sure.
But practical Dael, who runs games, recognizes that it is valid if you just need to, you haven't finished prepping for a 3-hour session, you need to fill up some of that time. You need to fill up some of that time, and you know that your players won't solve this puzzle very quickly, so you give them a puzzle. You give them a puzzle that takes up some of the time, and that is valid, and you were valid.
I did that last session. But, again, broadening, like a puzzle doesn't have to be a thing that someone has set up for the players to solve, like in world, for the players to solve. One of my favorite types of traps is this corridor is mostly caved in. You can lift this piece of stone to get past it, but it will cause a cave-in, or it risks causing a cave-in. And that's not a trap in the traditional sense of like,
trap. Yeah.
It's an inherent to the environment. And so you can set up, like a puzzle could be, this character has gone missing in the village and you need to put together a couple of clues, like a murder mystery or whatever it is, can be a form of puzzle that is more than just like one room with spinning stones in it necessarily.
You can also make puzzles more esoteric. So it doesn't look like a puzzle, but it technically is a puzzle. Like I was in a game once a friend of mine ran, and this is why I think giving something physical to the player is so enriching. I was given
You're
a pocket.
enriching their enclosure.
Yeah, but kind of literally. I was given a pocket watch by the dungeon master, and he was like, we were all separated. All of the players were separated. So, I mean, the characters were separated. The players, we were physically in the same place. And I had this pocket watch for out of game months before we reunited. And as soon as we reunited, I told the other characters that I had the pocket watch, and one of the other players snatched it from my hand. He said, I have been waiting so long. He turned it over onto the back and just jiggled with it for a second, and it popped open and there was a note inside. It killed him. He was watching me just play with the pocket watch, being like, check the back.
The long form dragon claw. That's what I'm going to call that prop style puzzle.
I know. Yeah, it was amazing. I felt like an idiot for a moment, but I immediately after that, I was like, that's so cool. And then I made some characters were hunting down a monster hunter or whatever. And I gave them a glass jar. And a glass jar with some opaque stuff or whatever to protect what was inside. Because a player opened it up, and I had put a little plastic grenade on a string and a little message. The message inside said "boom," and as soon as the player opened it up, he physically threw the grenade in shock, and I've never felt so great.
Incredible.
Props can be good. That's the moral of this story.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, if people want to if they want to see more of you playing Dungeons and Dragons, where can they find you?
I can be found on most street corners screaming about how the rules for grappling are easy. You just don't want to read them. But aside from that, I can be found at Retro Archetype on Twitter, on Instagram, on Twitch, and that's it, actually, I think.
And people can catch you playing at D&D in the podcast D&D is for Nerds. That's what I was trying to set you up for.
Forgot about that one.
It was a puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, so where can people find you playing D&D?
Yes, it's at D&D is for Nerds, at D&D. It's just Google D&D is for Nerds. I'm all apples and eggs now. Or Sans Pants Radio is the name of our network.
You might even be able to find it in this very podcast app that you are listening to the Eldritch Lorecast on, or the YouTube channel. You can close this YouTube video in a moment and go find that one, because the algorithm likes it if you watch right to the end. Speaking of which,
we'll put a link.
There'll be things, yeah. If you have enjoyed this episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, please consider giving it a like, subscribing to the channel, subscribing to us in your podcast app, whatever you happen to be listening to this on. We're here on Twitch at 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on a Tuesday, which is 7 p.m. Eastern in America. Pacific time, it's 4 p.m. streaming live, so you can catch a live episode there. Come hang out, be part of the chat. Or if you want to hang out with us, you can send an email to podcast@ghostfiregaming.com, and we will take those emails and we will read them and we shall discuss them and discover stories of hand grenades hidden in jars. My name is Ben Byrne. I've been here with Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill, Adam Carnevale, and we will catch you all next week.
Bye.